We're very privileged today to be able to hear from Max Cotterill. He is a San Diego-based community organizer for National Nurses United, the country's fastest growing and largest union of bedside nurses. At NNU, he organizes with the union's campaign to win Medicare for all nationally and CalCare at the state level in California. He also helps to run field campaigns to support candidates and measures that the union has endorsed. Prior to that, Max was the deputy field director at the Real Justice PAC, which helped elect civil rights-minded prosecutors around the country who use the powers of their office to reduce mass incarceration, police violence, and injustice. Before that, he worked on the national organizing staff of the Bernie 2016 campaign in Vermont. And so thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, Max.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. And I think this is the second or third year that I've been a part of this presentation to this group. So yeah, always excited to come back and yeah, share some of our approach to organizing and campaigns. So I'll share my screen in a minute, but what I'm going to be kind of talking about today is a workshop that we have on strategy, tactics, and escalation. And specifically, this is going to be kind of nested in the context of the Medicare for All movement. So let me go ahead and share my screen real quick here. Okay, there we go. So yeah, so I'm going to be kind of, like I said, going over strategy, tactics, escalation, and specifically, this is going to be in terms of running a local, state, or national campaign focused on Medicare for All. And so I'm going to be kind of starting out with an overview of what we actually mean by strategy, tactics. I'll also be talking about goals. And so I'll talk about kind of the differences between those different terms, and then kind of on the other end, what escalation is and when it might be used in the context of a campaign. And I'm also going to talk about a ton of different tactics. I'm going to talk about what they are and how you might use them in a campaign. And then at the very end, we should have a little bit of time for a quick breakout activity. It'll take like 5-10 minutes, where everyone will get to kind of practice some of the skills that I'm going to talk about and just kind of go through a very small group exercise together. So having said all of that, yeah, like I said, the purpose of this is to kind of talk about campaign building 101. And within that, there are a number of different components to a good campaign plan. So specifically, I'm going to talk about objective, goals, strategy, tactics, and then escalation if necessary. And those are kind of the building blocks for any campaign that you might be engaged in or you might be organizing in. And again, for this presentation, I'm going to specifically be talking about Medicare for All, but really this is like a general framework and could be applied to any campaign or any issue. But really anybody can do these things. You really just need to kind of write it down and kind of map these different building blocks to a timeline. And that is pretty much how you come up with a campaign plan. So let's get into objectives first. So when I use the word objective, what I'm talking about is in this context is winning and enacting a Medicare for All system in the U.S. And the campaign goals that we identify within that should all be kind of building towards this ultimate objective. And if they are not, and we can't identify how our plan is working towards that objective, then that is a sign that we should reconsider our plan. And to talk about goals very briefly, before we even get to strategy and tactics, we need to kind of understand what our goal is. So that might be, who are we trying to influence? Do we have an organizing target? What are we asking that organizing target to do? What's the goal? What's the outcome, right? So at at NNU, we have a national campaign focused on trying to pass Medicare for all. And so often this might look like, a kind of goal there might be to get a specific member of Congress or a senator to do something that helps us get closer towards that ultimate objective of winning Medicare for all. So, for example, that could be co-sponsoring Medicare for all, HR 3421. It could be to sign our Patients Over Profits pledge, which is a pledge that it's kind of a sub campaign that we have to get politicians to pledge to refuse any campaign donations from the corporate healthcare industry. Or it could be something like just being more vocal and proactive as an existing supporter of Medicare for all. But whatever it is, kind of in addition to this overarching campaign goal, it's always a good idea to kind of break down a few more kind of sub goals that you want to aim to meet on the way to to winning, right? So, for example, if your overall goal is to get your member of Congress to co-sponsor Medicare for all, then what are the campaign sub goals within that to get closer to your demand? Are you trying to build public support? If so, how, in what ways are you building support, and how much? Those are some questions you might ask. Are you trying to put public pressure on a target? So if so, how are you doing that? When are you doing that? Those are kind of some of the different goals and questions you should think through. And so a really easy system for kind of working through your goals is to follow the acronym SMART. And so the kind of elements of this are specific. So you want to be as specific as possible. Who is involved? Who is your organizing target? Who is your audience? You want your goals to be measurable. So you want to be able to measure the success of your campaign in meeting your goal. So for example, you want to get X number of people to do a specific action. You want it to be achievable. So in other words, is it possible? Is it within our capacity to do? How many people are in our group? What resources do we have available? Is this goal actually, can we actually attain it? Realistic. So this is related to the last point, but you want to ask yourself, will we actually do this? Do we care enough about this to work on it for the long term? Do we have sufficient time as a group of volunteers to dedicate ourselves to this goal? Those are some of the questions you might ask. And then finally, time bound. So what's the timeline for the campaign? By what date do you want to accomplish the goal? So once you've started by identifying your goal or goals that kind of meet these criteria, then it's time to think about how you're going to actually achieve your goal. And so this is your strategy. So in other words, your strategy is the overall plan that you want to use to influence your organizing target and achieve your goals. So it's your theory on like how you're going to make the changes that you want to see happen. You can also think of it as your roadmap or your game plan, like you see here, in the picture on the slide. But it's really important to note that your strategy is very different than your tactics. A lot of people will kind of use these terms interchangeably, but they're related, but they're not the same thing. So tactics are kind of the specific action steps that you're going to take to carry out your larger strategy. And I'll go into much more depth about tactics in just a minute. But you should start by deciding your strategy first, and then choosing tactics that fall into your plan and that help advance your larger strategy. So to make it a little bit more concrete, some of the questions that you might consider when approaching a campaign strategy, who's your target? What decision maker or makers are you trying to influence? How can you actually influence those people or that specific person? And I'll talk about this framework in a second, but do you need to give them an opportunity to be a champion and actually look like a hero, or do you need to pressure them? Do you need to shame them, right? There's different strategies for different contexts. And by asking these questions, that can kind of help you arrive at the strategy that's going to fit best for whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So what is it going to take to influence them? So another thing that can be helpful to do is to identify a couple different possible strategies and then kind of evaluate and choose between them. Figure out which one fits best. And by doing this, you can kind of delineate between different approaches. You can figure out, just which one feels more appropriate for your situation. So let's just say that your goal is to get your member of Congress to sign the Patients Over Profits pledge and to publicly say that they will stop taking campaign contributions from insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, hospital corporations. One possible strategy would be to publicly shame them, right? Draw attention to the amount of money that they currently take. Another possible strategy would be to increase public support so that they feel like they have the support necessary to kind of publicly challenge the industry and take this pledge. So those are two completely valid strategies, but they're very different, right? And so you should kind of consider different strategies and determine which one is going to be more impactful in your specific situation. So I also just want to talk about tactics very briefly, and just kind of define it a little bit more. So again, tactics are the ways in which you try to advance your strategy. So what are the action steps you're going to take? So an analogy might be that your strategy is your recipe, but your tactics are the ingredients in that recipe. So just to kind of go through a couple examples here. If your strategy is focused on demonstrating public support, then tactics that you might choose to accomplish that could be to drive phone calls to someone, to collect petition signatures, hold a phone bank or a text bank party to identify more supporters. Or on the other hand, does your organizing target need to be publicly pressured? You might choose a tactic like holding a press conference in front of their office, or a rally outside their office, or organizing people to send in letters to the editor. And just remember that again, tactics are different than strategy. So a rally outside of your target's office is not in of itself a strategy. It is one tactic that should be part of a larger plan to influence them, right? Collecting petition signatures is not a strategy. It is one tactic, again, that should be part of a larger plan. So I'll transition here to talking about some just general good campaign planning practices. So just to recap very quickly, the first thing you want to do is have your overall objective in mind and make sure that your plan is building towards that. The second thing is that you want to craft a SMART goal or goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Then you want to identify how it is that you're going to create the changes necessary for your goal to be achieved. That is your strategy. And then finally, the last step is to fill in the tactics or the action steps that you're going to utilize to carry out your strategy. And once you have that, your objective, goal, strategy, and tactics, then you map them out to a timeline, and that is your campaign plan. So it's pretty straightforward, not too hard. So I also want to just talk about a few different common pitfalls. Oops, hold on here. Oh, cursor disappeared. Okay, here we go. Yes, so let's talk about a couple different places that you can maybe hit some snags with campaign planning. So I would say one common pitfall can be having a goal or a strategy that maybe is vague or is not achievable. That's I would say fairly common. And an example of a vague goal would be, we need to build support in our area for Medicare for all. So it sounds good, but it is way too vague. We need to be way more specific. So how is it that we're building public support? And we want to also avoid goals that are just kind of arbitrary. So for example, you might, if you said we want to get 10 letters to the editor submitted, that would be an arbitrary goal, because there might, unless there is a specific reason why that number is impactful. Otherwise, it's just random, and that would be a pitfall. You also want to be careful to kind of avoid utilizing tactics that don't help meet your goals or fit into the larger strategy. So, for example, someone might say, "Hey, we should go do a honk and wave. So we should get people to go hold signs up outside, on the street by our member of Congress's office to get people to honk. And by doing that, we're gonna get them to support Medicare for all." So that might be, maybe it's a fun tactic, but it's probably not the best tactic for that particular strategy, right? It's not likely to cross the representative's radar, and so it wouldn't actually be creating any pressure that you are looking for. So that would be a mismatch between a tactic and strategy. And I'll just say the final kind of best practice in working through your goal, strategy, and tactics planning is always maintaining clear communication with the organizing target's office. So this is always an important element of your campaign, that maybe it sounds obvious, but you want the intended target of your pressure to be aware that you are organizing. You want them to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that way, you know that the target of your pressure is noticing the pressure. They know who is causing it, and they know who to go to make it stop, or how to make it stop. So the final thing I want to talk about here before I move on is a potential final step of your campaign planning, which is escalation. And so you might arrive at escalation when your tactics aren't working, right? And sometimes it just means that you need to rethink your strategy and your tactics. Maybe it's not the time to escalate, and you actually just need a different and better plan. But sometimes, though, you've made your campaign visible and you've hit a crossroads, right? At that point, it might be time to escalate. So maybe your organizing target is aware of the pressure, but they're ignoring you, and you've given them a chance to respond, and they're just not responding. Or maybe they have responded and they said, "No, I'm not going to do what you want me to do." So at that point, you kind of have two options. You can chart a new strategy, like a completely different strategy, or you can start to escalate, right? Where you take things to the next level with new tactics meant to kind of ratchet up the pressure. And escalation might mean choosing a strategy and tactics that make your target's stance known. So if they said no to your demand, do you have a quote of them saying that? Do you have a video or audio clip of them saying no? What kind of strategy and tactics can you build out to publicize that information and let the public know about where your target stands? Once you do that, how can you capture people's reaction to escalate further? Maybe it's by directing public anger into phone calls to their office, or maybe it's a direct action outside of their office. Escalation could also look different than that. Maybe you've identified a weakness or a vulnerability that they have. Maybe you figure out that they really depend on a few key donors or endorsers who might be upset to hear that they don't support your demand. So can you target those people? Can you call them, let them know? Can you pressure them in some way, right? This is going to look different for every campaign. So I think what's most important is that your group asks yourself two questions before you escalate. The first question is it time to escalate? So do we need to escalate yet? Has our target clearly said no, or are they ignoring us? Did we try everything that we could? It's really important to answer this for yourselves and to answer it honestly, and not escalate too soon. If you do escalate too soon, then you run the risk of alienating your target. You can think of escalation as kind of a no going back scenario. So it's not to say that you shouldn't do it. I would say most campaigns that I'm involved in end up involving escalation at some point. So there's lots of cases that you should use it, but it's just good to be kind of thoughtful about how you do it and when you do it. But if you answer yes to this first question, then the second question that you should ask yourself is, how should we escalate? What do we know about our target at this point? What do we know about their vulnerabilities? What leverage do we have? What power do we have? This is what's going to help, help you with make a new plan with a new goal, a new strategy, and new tactics. So at this point, I've now kind of given just a broad overview of goals, strategy, tactics, and escalation, and some of their definitions. And so I'm going to take a step back and focus more on strategy for the next few minutes. So I'm gonna go over a really helpful tool that you can use to determine your campaign strategy. And let me just kind of explain what you're looking at here. So this graphic shows 4 different quadrants of basic strategy types, and this graphic is maybe a way to think about how to assess your campaign and decide which box your campaign might fit into. So as you can see, the 4 quadrants are based on 2 different factors: whether our target is with us or against us, and whether the public is with us or against us. And the combination of any of these 2 factors will lead us to what type of campaign strategy we should pursue. So let's kind of go through them one step at a time. So in the top left quadrant, you'll see hero. So this is where our target is with us and the public is with us. So for example, let's say that our member of Congress is a progressive member. They support Medicare for all. They'd probably be interested in doing more, but they just haven't prioritized this issue. But if someone asked them to do more, if someone asked them to do something like holding a town hall or calling for a hearing in a specific committee, then they would probably do it, or they would be open to it. And their district also has a huge amount of support for Medicare for all. So here, a good strategy would be to make the public support more visible to the member of Congress and use it to ask them to step up and do more. And so as a result, they would look like a hero, right? So that's why we would call it the hero strategy. We're giving our target an opportunity to be a hero. They would probably do the right thing, but they just need a gentle push for them to do it. So this type of campaign might be really positive and high road. So that's one example. In the top right, you can see it says pressure. So in this scenario, the organizing target is not with us, but the public is. So what we want to do is create pressure. So let's say our member of Congress is a Democrat. They don't support Medicare for all, even though there's a lot of support for it in their district, and their constituents are very supportive. So in that case, our group might pursue a strategy to demonstrate that public support and really highlight that it exists. And then we might escalate if that original strategy doesn't work. So we might ask to meet with them and ask them to support the bill, to support this issue. If they say no, then we let them know that we're going to be phone banking voters in their district, and we will just be, relaying their lack of support for Medicare for all. So that would be an example of pressure, of trying to cause friction between the fact that public is with us, but they are not. In the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see it says political cover. So this scenario is where our organizing target wants to be with us, but they don't see the public support yet. So it's less that the public is against us and more that they are just, maybe neutral or kind of apathetic. So I guess a concrete example might be that the member of Congress says, I would support Medicare for all, but I don't think it's very popular, right? So in that case, that means that our job would be to build and show the public support. So the group might make a plan to collect, a number of signatures from the district in support of Medicare for all, and plan, a delivery action to the member of Congress at the end. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the stop sign. And so this is if the organizing target is against us and the public is against us, then that is a clue that we should we should not engage there, right? We should move on. And luckily, when we're talking about Medicare for all, this is almost never the case because it is very popular. But this would be a clue that it might not be worth your time to try to come up with a strategy if both the target and the public are against us. So again, just to recap, when you're coming up with a strategy, whether it's for Medicare for all organizing work or any campaign that you want to work on, you can use this graphic to kind of answer yourselves two questions. One, is the target with us or against us? Is the public with us or against us? Based on your answers to those questions, you can kind of sort yourself into a category and then craft a campaign strategy that kind of fits that quadrant. So I'm going to shift gears and talk about tactics. Tactics that you might fit into your campaign plan. So on this slide, you can see just a few tactics, maybe a dozen tactics or so. And I'm going to start by kind of going through, I'm going to go through these one by one. And these are tactics that do not involve a high level of escalation. And then I'll kind of work up to the tactics that do involve a fair amount of escalation. So the first one is a door-to-door canvas. This is where you and your group of volunteers would literally go door to door in a neighborhood, engaging people on their support for your issue. You'd be talking to people about your issue and then end with some kind of call to action. So it could be to make a call, sign a petition, sign up to join your campaign, come out to a specific event. This is a really great way to build public pressure on elected officials and also to grow the power of your movement, since every supporter that you identify becomes a potential person that you could mobilize in your campaign. And so what's involved in planning a door-to-door canvas is usually just choosing a neighborhood where you can knock doors, maybe creating a list of doors to knock, or it's also referred to as like turf or walk lists, which is not always necessary. You can sometimes just knock on every door on a given street. And then you'll just need to prepare materials like clipboards, printed petition sheets, pens, that kind of thing. There's also crowd canvassing, which we kind of differentiate between door canvassing and crowd canvassing. This is similar to a door-to-door canvas. In this case, you'd be going, instead of going to houses or apartments in a neighborhood, then in a crowd canvas, you'd want to set up at some place with a lot of foot traffic. So people also kind of refer to this as street canvassing. And a good location to do this might be a farmer's market or shopping center, public park. I mean, really anywhere that there's going to be lots of people walking around. And similarly, this is a great way to show public support and pressure, since you're asking people to take some sort of action to join you. And this would require similar materials to a door-to-door canvas. Then there's also phone banking. Oh, wow, those are very blurry. Okay, well, there's so there's phone banking. This is where you'd gather a group of people together. It could be on Zoom, could be in person, to call through a list of people. And so you might be calling people who are voters, and you might be using a dialer to do it, or you could be manually calling a list of supporters in a spreadsheet. A phone bank is very versatile. You could use it for many different purposes. Could be to turn people out to an event, to drive calls to an elected official, and to organize one of these in person. You would just need to find a space, maybe in a community center or at someone's home. And virtually, you would just need to get people onto Zoom or some other kind of video meeting link, Google Meet. And the basic materials that you would need is just a list of people to call and a script, basically. There's also text banking, which is very similar to phone banking, but instead of calling people, you are texting them. And typically, there's different types of software that you can use to text bank people. We use NNU uses a software called ThroughText that allows you to send a lot of different texts at the same time, and then kind of have one-on-one conversations with people who respond. There's also car caravans. This would be, where you get a group of people together and maybe drive a specified route. You could decorate your cars to kind of draw attention to your issue. The car caravan might start or end at a high visibility location, like your elected official's office. And this is a great way to kind of publicly shame or pressure your target. We did a lot of these during around the start of the COVID pandemic, since it was something that we could do while staying socially distanced. And yeah, pretty easy to organize one of these. All you have to do is kind of choose a route, recruit people to meet at a starting location, and then drive the route, basically. There's also, educational events, forums, panels. These allow you to kind of educate the public about why they should join your fight. You could, show a film or gather a group of experts to speak, or have kind of a facilitated public discussion on your issue. But this is a great tactic for building public support and can help support a pressure or a political cover strategy. There's also legislative visits. Legislative visit would just be where you get a group of people together, typically constituents of an elected official, and then you go and have a face-to-face meeting with your target or their staff. So this could be in person or virtually. And a legislative visit gives you an opportunity to get your target on the record, to directly address their questions and concerns, and to demonstrate a level of support for the issue. And this might sound intimidating, but it's actually very easy to do. And for members of Congress, their district offices exist for the purpose of meeting with constituents. So, it can be as easy as just calling or emailing the office to ask for a meeting, and then just getting a group of people together to go with you. You want to create an agenda for the meeting and kind of assign roles. But yeah, very straightforward. And actually, this picture is from a successful pressure campaign we had to try to get Congressman Carbajal in California to support Medicare for all. And this meeting was actually at the end of a campaign where we did lots of different things to pressure him. And this is the meeting where he agreed to co-sponsor. There's also letters to the editor, or LTEs. Those are letters that anybody can write that will appear in the opinion section of a newspaper, and it just give you the opportunity to spread your message to a larger audience. So this could be a good tactic to publicly shame someone or call out your target. And yeah, that's kind of a short list of some of the tactics that you might choose before you move to the escalation piece of your campaign plan. Although I'm sure that you all can see that any tactic can be used in a variety of ways. There's a lot of context that goes along with different tactics and kind of how you use them. But the three next tactics I'm going to go over are good if you are just starting to kind of escalate. So the first one is a petition signature delivery. So if you've been gathering petition signatures in support of your issue, then you can make an even bigger impact by organizing an event around the delivery of those signatures to your target. So you can use this to notify the press, or you kind of turn it into a press conference, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But this is a great tactic for a pressure or political cover strategy. You could put all your physical petition signatures in a big box to physically deliver to your target's office, or you could do something more symbolic, like deliver a letter with a link to the online signatures that you have. This slide is also very blurry. I don't know what happened with the picture quality, but in this picture, this is activists in the UK who are they've collected signatures opposing the privatization of the NHS, and they are delivering them to an elected official. They've kind of created a big scene with it. They have like a stretcher where they've kind of put all of the petition signatures on. So yeah, very creative. So the next tactic is press conference. So a press conference is another great way to draw attention to your target. It's just an event where you invite the local press to hear speeches from your group. And so this would be usually to announce something big. So it could be as something like a petition signature delivery. It could be to announce something newsworthy, like maybe your member of Congress is telling your group that they will not support Medicare for all. That's something that you could announce to the press along with what your plan is to kind of organize in response to that. A press conference might sound like a hard thing to do, but really anybody can do this. You could make it as simple as gathering in a park or a sidewalk, recruit some people to give speeches, invite your local newspaper, and that's a press conference, right? Ahead of the event, you would write what's called a press advisory, which is basically just a document that says what's going to happen at the event. And then you can send that, you can email it to local papers and TV news stations that you want to invite. And then you just follow up by calling them to ask that they attend. And then after your event, you can follow up by sending out a press release, which is basically a document that recaps what happened at the event. And you would send it to those same outlets. You're basically just trying to make it as easy as possible for them to cover it. And if you do that and you're persistent, then they will cover it. Another tactic could be to take advantage of public events that an elected official is holding. So it could be like packing a town hall with supporters, or packing a city council meeting or public comment with supporters. Basically just where you get a lot of your supporters together to attend an event in person or virtually that your target is going to be present at or paying attention to. And then you just make sure that there's a very public display of their support for your issue. So, if your representative is organizing a town hall where they're going to be taking questions from the audience, you can line up a bunch of people to ask them questions about supporting Medicare for all. And actually, in fact, we're working on this tactic right now for a campaign in California where we're going after an assembly member. She's holding a town hall, and if we are successful, then all of the questions are going to be about our issue, and so it's going to be kind of put a magnifying glass on our issue and kind of put her on the spot very publicly. And so yeah, this picture is from a town hall that former Speaker Nancy Pelosi held in San Francisco, where we recruited lots of nurses to go and highlight support for Medicare for all at that town hall. So the next three tactics that I'm going to go over are if you decide it's time for maybe a higher level of escalation and you want to continue to kind of turn up the heat on your organizing target. So I'm sure all of you know what a rally or a march is. Very straightforward. You just gather as many people as possible to show the strength and power of your movement. And it's a great tactic for pressure or a political cover strategy because it shows your target how far-reaching support is of your issue. And to organize a rally, it's pretty straightforward. You just have to choose a public space, like a public plaza or a park. If you're organizing a march in the streets, then typically you need to get a permit or at least let the local police department know of your plans. And sometimes you don't have to do that if you have enough people, but yeah, that it can be helpful. And you can also avoid this step if you're doing a march on like a public sidewalk. You can usually get away with not having a permit. But otherwise, organizing a march or rally, might involve just lining up people who are going to speak to the crowd and then just doing a ton of outreach to get a good turnout. You might also create posters or signs to hand out to your attendees. This is a big march we did in San Francisco with a few thousand of our nurses, again, to pressure Speaker Pelosi to move Medicare for all forward back in 2019. There's also direct actions. So this is, if your campaign has reached a point where escalation might be needed. A direct action is kind of a catch-all term. It could be anything from like a sit-in at your target's office to physically blockading something with your body. We've seen this tactic used in different movements over the last few years. Sometimes people have taken over like freeways with a march and block traffic. It could be like a die-in action somewhere where people kind of demonstrate, they lie down to demonstrate, dying, I guess, by laying on the ground and taking up that space for some amount of time. But I think in general, a direct action is just means that you are directly using your power. So it could be through like economic means. So I think like a boycott, for example, could be considered a direct action, or physically using your body to draw attention to your issue or pressure your target to respond. And I'll just say sometimes arrest is a possibility during a direct action. Also worth noting that in organizing, there's both nonviolent direct action and violent direct action. And just to speak for NNU, we will never condone or accept the use of violent direct action. We're very much in the nonviolent direct action camp. But yes, it definitely can have a time and place where it's effective. And these are two pictures from different direct actions we did. The one on the right is we went to the pharmaceutical lobby's headquarters in DC and just like completely covered their front doors with printouts of people's medical GoFundMes to just underline the healthcare crisis in our country and the fact that there's so many people who can't get the care that they need because there's a for-profit industry who is not willing to stop making billions of dollars. And we got that I think it was on the front page of the New York Times. There was a great picture of this, of that action. And then on the left was another direct action we did at the Capitol where we went to, I can't remember which office this is. It's either Speaker Pelosi or one of the chairs of I think it was the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, his office. One of the committees that has jurisdiction over Medicare for All. And we delivered a giant pill bottle that we made full of monopoly money to symbolize all of the corporate healthcare money that this member of Congress was taking, and to kind of directly challenge them around that. So here you can see some nurses dropping off that pill to a very unlucky intern at the front of that office. So that's direct action. There's also bird dogging, which is a fun one. And if you have not heard of this before, then you might say, why is it called bird dogging? That is a really weird name. I have no idea why it's called that, but the tactic is where one person or a group of people approaches your target unannounced in a public space where they are not expecting you, and you ask them about supporting your issue on the spot and try to get an answer from them. And bonus points if you have someone with you who is recording on a cell phone. It's a very simple tactic, but it's super effective, which is why people do it all the time. So maybe some of you will remember the middle picture, which is where an activist approached Senator Jeff Flake in an elevator in the Capitol and confronted him about his vote to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. That was an example of bird dogging. You can plan this tactic in advance if you know where your target is going to be somewhere, or you can just take advantage of it in the moment. Sometimes this happens when people run into elected officials when they in public, like at the airport or at a restaurant. On the right side, this is one of our Medicare for All movement leaders in New Jersey who was bird dogging. Representative Frank Pallone, who's a powerful Democrat who didn't support Medicare for All, and after a very long campaign, did end up co-sponsoring. But yes, this was definitely part of the escalation, is to really kind of ratchet up the pressure on him to support. So those are just some of the tactics that you might use in your local campaign. This list of tactics is definitely just a starting point. It's not exhaustive. And I would love if anybody can think of a tactic that I didn't cover. If you want to put it in the chat, maybe that'd be interesting. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of different tactics. If you look up, I don't remember the exact website, but if you look up nonviolent tactics, I think on Google, then there's a list that someone put together of like just hundreds and hundreds of tactics that have been used, across the world, across history, in different campaigns, different movements. So there's and people are coming up with new ones all the time. So this is definitely not an exhaustive list, I think is what I mean to say. And if you're ever looking for resources on any of these tactics that I covered, you are welcome to reach out to our campaign. We have lots of like guides and just documentation on different tactics. And I'll just put our campaign email in the chat. So yeah, if you're down the road, you're organizing a campaign, and you're thinking about doing a specific tactic, you're welcome to email us, and we will gladly share any resources that we have around any of these tactics. We have scripts for knocking doors or running a phone bank or agendas for different types of events. And I will also just take this opportunity to plug our campaign sign-up link, which I'll put in the chat. But yeah, I want to transition to talking about how some of these tactics might be applied in a specific campaign. So for this kind of example, I'm going to use a real life example. I'm going to talk about Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, who represents Ohio's 9th district. And so I'm going to use that. I'm going to use her as a concrete real life example. And we'll kind of walk through some campaign planning and how that might work. And then after that, then I think we will be ready to just move into our group exercise in breakout rooms. So yeah, one thing that I did not talk about, which is another very useful approach to campaign planning, is power mapping and how to kind of build the power map. And I don't have the time to go into this too in depth today, especially since this presentation is really focused on kind of strategy, tactics, and escalation. But I will drop 2 resources in the chat here to learn more about power mapping. And do that. There you go. And these are 2 of many resources. A lot of different organizations that do community organizing have different kind of approaches to power mapping. But for now, I'm just going to kind of give you the basic definition of it and talk about how it could be used. So building a power map, what you're trying to do when you do that is it's something that helps you understand sort of the political lay of land and the kind of context and circumstances that you are in. So in other words, it helps you understand the power dynamic of your campaign. And so power map is going to help you answer the question, who has influence on your target? Where do you have the most influence? Where do your allies have influence? And where does your opposition kind of fall on this map? And most importantly, it's going to help you and your group kind of more clearly reveal what the path to win might be. So it'll kind of help inform the strategy that you choose, and then the tactics that you pick, and then how and when to escalate if needed. And so I'll show you in just a minute what a power map might look like. So again, let's talk about Marcy Kaptur as a concrete example. And she, just to give you some background, she's a Democrat in Congress representing a district in Ohio, which spans Toledo all the way over to Cleveland. So she used to support Medicare for All. She was a co-sponsor of HR 676, which was the old Medicare for All bill. And then for some reason in 2018, she stopped supporting Medicare for All. And she was first elected in the 80s in 1983. And she very consistently wins by huge margins. And that is in part because she is in a very blue district. She's white, she's Catholic, she's the longest serving woman in the House of Representatives. She's the daughter of Polish immigrants, and her mom was a union organizer. And sometimes she can be very progressive. She initially supported Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton in 2016. She was very vocally opposed to NAFTA because of its impact on U.S. labor, and Dodd-Frank because it didn't break up the banks. But then on the other hand, she can be very moderate, right? In 2010, she said she wouldn't vote for the ACA until it was assured that it would not fund abortion, which I should also note that she seems to have very much evolved on that, and she's now much better on that issue. But her district is a great example of a district to run a local campaign in. And she's an example of where we could probably move her to support again with the right power map, the right strategy, and the right tactics. So if we look at what groups are in her district, we find that there are a couple different groups that we would call core allies. So these are groups like Cleveland DSA and Northwest Ohio DSA. There's a statewide group called Ohio SPAN, Ohio Single Payer Action Network, right? There are also a lot of potential allied groups. And so in this category, we would put groups such as local NAACP chapters, United Auto Workers, or ATU, or APWU, American Postal Workers Union. This is a district where labor unions have a lot of influence. And some of these unions both support Medicare for All and are endorsers of Marcy Capture. And another thing I just want to shout out, coming from a union, is that national support for Medicare for All can be a little bit of an approximation with unions. Sometimes it'll be the case that the national union or the international union supports Medicare for All, but the local is not as supportive or is not as active on it. And then sometimes the opposite is true, right? Where you'll have a local that is really, really supportive, and the international is not supportive at all. So so either way, we tend to consider a national union's endorsement to be at least an approximation. But in addition, you should always do more research or talk to folks on the ground to kind of get a better sense of where different groups are at on Medicare for All or any issue. So on this slide, this is an example of a power map. So we're using a template which has been developed by our friends over at a group called Healthcare Now. And in this diagram, you can look to the horizontal axis to see that we have a range of support from strongly support all the way to strongly oppose. And then on the vertical axis, we have a range of influence from not influential at all the way up to very influential. And this is specifically influence with our target. And so to make a power map like this, you just need to do a little bit of research to find out who the key players are in your community, and then what their relationship is to your target. So you'll identify the players, and then you'll place them on a map where you think they belong. And then once you're done with the map, then you have a nice visual of the kind of basic political landscape in your community for your campaign. And you'll be able to make a better map and a better strategy for moving forward. So in this power map, you can see that the groups tend to form a line going from bottom left to top right, which is not what we want. We want a line going in the opposite direction. We want most of the power on our side. In other words, we want an arrow going from top left to bottom right. And that means that we're going to need to do some work to move these groups that are in the middle to become more supportive, and then organize to help groups in the bottom left have, gain more power and influence, which is represented in this power map by the red arrows. So that's kind of our goal here, is move the middle players to the left and the bottom left players up. So if we were going to design and execute a campaign in the 9th district to do this, what would our goal, strategy, and tactics be? So just to kind of take into consideration some of these details on the political terrain, we can conclude that in order to move Representative Marcy Capture to support Medicare for All, our campaign strategy should focus on moving our potential allies, so this is NAACP, as well as some of the unions, into a more active coalition with us. And then 2, build up the power of our core allied groups. So this is some of the local DSA chapters and Ohio SPAN. Based on this analysis of the district, you might decide that on a kind of medium term goal from that first point, and that could be to increase active support from labor unions in Capture's district. And we know that this goal is smart. We're looking for support from specific organizations. We know if we'll achieve it, so it's measurable. We know that these unions are friendly to our cause, so we know that it's attainable. And it's something that we can definitely do, so it's realistic. And we can easily set a specified amount of time to do it in. And since Capture is not currently a supporter, but we do know that the public is with us, we should come up with a pressure strategy. So a strategy for this goal might be to engage these unions or labor councils that they're members of to pass resolutions in support of Medicare for all, and to send letters to her office once they do. And so then, last but not least, what are some of the tactics that we could use to fit into our strategy of getting these unions to pass resolutions and send letters to our office? You can, if you want to put ideas in the chat, you can do that. Some of the tactics you might be considering could be petition collection, could be petition delivery, could be like an educational forum. There's lots of different things that you could use to kind of slot into this strategy. And that is really it.